Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar titled, What Does a Successful AI Implementation Look Like? My name is Patrick Moran. I'm on the marketing team here at H2O.ai. I'd love to start off by introducing our speakers. Vinod Iyengar is Vice President of Customer Success and Product at H2O.ai, and Rafael Cos is a Community and Partner Maker at H2O.ai. Before I hand it over to Vinod and Rafael, I'd like to go over the following housekeeping items. Please feel free to send us your questions throughout the session via the Questions tab in your console. We'll be happy to answer them towards the end of the webinar. And this webinar is being recorded. A copy of the webinar recording and slide deck will be made available after the presentation is over. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Vinod.
Thank you, Patrick. Just want to confirm, are you able to hear me okay, Patrick?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Hopefully, everyone's staying safe and healthy at their homes. Today's topic is essentially, as Patrick said, what does a successful AI implementation look like? And the reason we picked this topic is essentially to understand, well, we are, in the current sort of new world climate that we live in, AI, we believe, is more important than ever. And to do that, we wanted to kind of look at what are some maturity cycles that customers, have taken, where are different people in the AI journey. And to do this, we wanted to look through all our existing experiences with all our different customers, but also in the market to see what people have been doing and bring some of those best practices here to the table. And we want to make sure that this all aligns well with where you are in your journey. So as you're going through this journey of AI maturity, you might find yourself nodding and saying that, hey, oh yeah, we are at that stage or we are at this stage. And it's not to pick on someone, right? Everyone has to start somewhere. But more importantly, to use this as an opportunity to say understand where you are and use that to go further up. Go to the next slide, please. So when you look at the AI transformation experience, right? So we think it starts off from technology and goes all the way up, right? So people often, when they think about AI, they really think about the technology aspect of it, but forget about the part that this is also a people problem, right? AI and machine learning and data science starts with the people first. I mean, the data is important, the technology is important, but the people are equally, or if not more important. So you need to have that align across the organization from bottom to up, right? So let's start at the bottom, right? So you have technology. You want to make sure that, bring in your best platforms, best tools, the best partners, who your vendors are to work with, who can provide advanced analytics for many years to come, a platform that can truly scale and grow as newer technologies emerge and newer libraries and techniques come to the place. So that's obviously the most important part, but that's the foundation. Going up, you need to be able to set up a whole set of business operations where you can think about how we can use analytics as part of every step we take, right? Thinking about all the business areas where machine learning, AI, data science can help, and embed that in your business operations, part of your ongoing sustainable operations measures, right? So that's typically what customers start off with and start doing it. And once you reach a state, then you can go in to say, how can we help define the overall business mission itself with the transformation, right? So once you are where you are a mature cycle, you can think about at overall business management level or line of business level, each group thinks about the overall mission and how does that align well to their particular group's activities. And in doing so, how can data science, machine learning, and AI play a part? Embed that completely. And then finally, up at the top of the food chain, you have the senior management, the C-suite, if you will. Having a clear vision for what AI can do as an organization is critical, and you need buy-in at that level. So a truly AI transformed AI company will have a complete alignment top to bottom, right? All the way from the C-suite, CEO, senior management to the technologists, data scientists, the users, and the people on the floor, right? Everyone is completely aligned with a clear vision of how we're going to be data-driven, how we're going to use that in a day-to-day basis. So if you skip to the next slide. So this is an example of what that looks in practice, right? So if you can see, if you're a retailer, for example, you might be doing mass branding, right? So typically this is people do sometimes some segmentation. They know that, hey, older people like this, younger people might like this, and to adults and like teenagers might like this, right? So you have overall branding and some very basic segmentation, but essentially you do a lot of bass branding. And this is a good example of this is TV ads, right? So when you run a TV ad across a network or you run a Super Bowl ad, you're basically doing mass branding. You're putting an ad out for everyone, your entire audience, and find the lowest common denominator and appeal to everyone. And that works fine to an extent, but when you're thinking from a data-driven AI perspective, you're really looking at real-time individual experiences. What does every individual customer of yours want, right? And what does person A want versus person B? And being very, very catered to their individual needs and empathizing with them. And that's something that you can do only when you have a truly data-driven enterprise where you can start building those individual experiences. And obviously, with the advent of digital transformation, people started doing that. But more importantly, using the data and the knowledge you have about a person to offer them something meaningful and very personalized. So that's something that you'll see really good AI companies being able to do. Then you have like and when you look at the financial services side, typically what happens is risk analysis is done on a daily basis, right? If you're a trading company or even if you're a bank, right, you would have like risk files coming in every night, and then you would run through a risk analysis or manual agents looking at the transactions and then highlighting risky transactions and taking some action. Versus a transformed organization which might be doing real-time surveillance or real-time risk monitoring. As soon as a transaction happens, as soon as a trade happens, can you quickly find and highlight any risky ones and take some action even sometimes, right? So that's the example. That's a shift you can see. Similarly, on the healthcare side, if you start doing mass treatment, you can go towards more personalized, very specific healthcare. Treating each individual patient separately and handling them with care, knowing exactly their needs, their past history, medical histories, their needs in the future, and then giving them personalized healthcare. And then I have a couple more examples, but at a high level, what we're really looking at is you become more proactive instead of reactive, right? That's the big fundamental difference that AI can do for you. You as an organization can adapt to changes, but also preempt them by being ahead of the curve and offering your customers really personalized experiences, really specific care, and doing this almost all real time. Go to the next slide, please. So how do we do that, right? So this whole webinar is about this whole journey. How do we get you to do this journey? But before we get to that, and I mean, talk about why that's important. I mean, hopefully the previous two slides demonstrate, but let's talk about the world we are living in today, right? So if you go to the next slide. So we are in today, in the midst of this unprecedented pandemic. For a lot of folks, this is probably the first time they're encountering something similar to this in their lives, right? And the consensus is that, look, this crisis will pass, but life as we knew it is not going to be the same again, right? So things won't go back to normal, or rather there will be a new normal, right? So it's a brave new world that we are going to encounter, and people might, so there's some things that people are not going to go back to, right, very easily, or it'll take a while for that to happen. So if that's the case, how do we as businesses adapt? Like, how do we as people adapt to all the changes that are happening in front of us? Let's go to the next slide, please. Right, so as someone said, I think Vanessa Bates from Singularity Hub said that after COVID-19, the world will never be the same, but maybe it can be better, right? So what the learnings from this are that, hey, we need to be proactive. We need to be able to adapt our businesses. We need to understand when a disease and an epidemic outbreak happens, how can we model it better? Like a lot of people, I think, there's some obviously blame which probably is fair, but about how too many of these modeling exercises have been out there with COVID. But my personal belief is that at a higher level, overall, this has been a net good. I think the awareness this has created in terms of people thinking about how to model these things, how to analyze these things, is a mass learning experience in a way. Everyone is now, I think the flatten the curve movement has taught everyone the importance of statistics and analytics, right? The basic modeling, basic statistics, and everyone is now able to think about that. Once you are starting to think about that, you can use that idea for other places in the world, right? And you can start preventing or at least adapting for other situations that might arise, like climate change, for example, or other ways that the world might be different. And we are probably better off at the end of this, when we come out of this crisis, we more equipped to handle those things. Go to the next slide, please. So before we get to that, I think one of the things I want to point out is, of course, this is a very, very rich ecosystem, right? There's a lot of companies out there, a lot of tools out there, products out there, including ours. And often people come at this from a technology perspective, and we do too. I mean, as a technology company, we are often talking about the different ways, different features we have, different capabilities we have, and that's good. The good news is there is a lot of choices, but the bad news is it can also cause a lot of confusion, and it can make it really difficult for someone starting up. So our belief is that it's important to start from the overall process, the vision, the structure, and the team to do this. The tools can follow the choices, the ecosystems, platforms, and a lot of them are they work very seamlessly, right? So we, for example, work with a lot of these vendors in the space, and most of the vendors come together to solve a particular problem. So the technology itself is important, but that's not the primary place where you need to start with. So where do you start with? So let's look at the 5 keys for unlocking your AI, right? So we truly believe these are the 5 keys, right? So you talked about this in past webinars as well, but really it starts off with creating a data culture, right? Like putting the right team together. So who's on your team? Understanding the right, the mix of IT, business, data science, DevOps, engineering. You need all of these teams to come together, right? And often this talent is in your organization. People often think, oh, I need to hire a whole bunch of PhD machine learning people to get started. And in some cases that's probably true, but in a lot of cases that's not entirely true, right? You often, more often than not, you will have the people in your team that they might need some upskilling, but with a little bit of upskilling, a little bit of learning, you can get your existing team can take these challenges. The benefit they have is they know your business already very well. They know your pain points, and they can bring that knowledge, the domain knowledge, as we like to say, domain scientists, with a little bit of upskilling and pairing them with the right technical folks and the right technology and platform, you can make your existing team much more effective. So one of the things we do when we work with customers is finding out the right folks, and then finding those champions, the business leader who is motivated to use AI, the IT folks who are thinking about how do we make this a sustainable self-service platform, and the data scientists who are learning, or analysts who want to upskill themselves and become data scientists, and work with them to find the right structure. Go to the next slide, please. The second most important aspect, and this is, so let's say you have the time, right? But the more important thing is to be able to start asking those right questions, right? The journey to become a data-driven enterprise starts with asking simple questions, right? So if you every time you ask a question, the answer to that might be, oh, I need to look at the data, or sometimes you might find, oh, we don't actually have the data. So asking the right questions often leads you to good pathways to take them, right? So typically, every business is at a high level wants to make more money or save money, right? So it all boils down to, can I cut down my expenses and can I make more money, right? These are the fundamental 2 questions everyone asks. But you if you peel the onions down the line, if you start asking sub questions after that, okay, how do you make more money? You have to increase our customer base. How do you increase our customer base? We have to target better. How do we target better, right? So when you keep asking those questions, that helps you figure out, frame the problem better. And once you can start framing those problems better, you can make, it makes it really easy to then start applying the technology to solve those problems, right? Because these are big, hairy, nebulous problems at a high level, but when you peel them back sufficiently, you'll notice that you actually do have the data for solving a lot of those problems or answering a lot of those questions. And where you don't have data, you can start instrumenting your systems to collect the data so that down the line you should be able to answer this question. So that's a very, very important part. And at every level, you should be doing that, from the C-suite, the management, to line of business, or if you are an individual contributor, you should be still asking those questions on an everyday basis. How can my organization save money? How can we make more money? How can we better serve our customers? Next slide, please. The third part to that is building a communication and community, right? So this is a very important part that customers, like people often forget, right? So like I said, when you're trying to build together a new data-driven enterprise or creating a new culture in your organization, you need to be able to share best practices. You need to learn from others, right? So this happens in two ways. One is looking inside out, and the other one is outside in, right? So first is obviously look within your organization. Are there other groups which are doing better than some other groups, right? So see where people are starting to make some changes there. Are there line of business in your organization which are already starting to do some interesting work with data science? Creating forums for people to share their best practices, creating informal sort of centers of excellence, for example, giving up people the opportunity to participate and share their work across the organization, and using that to inspire others. So that's something you can do today. But you can also do this outside in, right? So you can start participating in local communities, right? Find local data science charters or meetups. And one of the things we do is we have, I want to say over close to 100 meetup groups across the world in different cities. And so basically there's a meetup group very close to you if you look, right? Anywhere around the world. And what that offers you is a space to go and meet like-minded peers who might be facing similar problems or might have solved those problems, and you can take some learnings from the best practices, find out the pitfalls, and use that to share and collaborate. And that allows you as an organization to grow much quicker. Next slide, please. So then we come to the technology, right? So as I said, technology, often people start with the technology. We think it's important, but not the most important, right? So it is one of those big pieces that you need to solve for. But as you get to the technology part, start thinking all these questions, right? Where do you invest? What do you do, right? So often the big question is build versus buy, right? So, anywhere you have smart people, they always want to say, hey, let me just build this thing, and that might be good for a lot of organizations. But if your primary business is not technology, if your primary business is being a bank, or if your primary business is being a health organization or a retailer, right? And you have a lot of domain expertise and you have a lot of things you could do there. You should think hard about whether you should build or you should buy, right? So that's a question you should always get. Like, play to your strengths, play to your core competencies. Because even though building it might not be too difficult, you can actually get some things done fast. There's always a question of maintenance. There's always a question of technical debt. So those are the sort of the boring, unglamorous parts of what technology is. Once you build a platform, build something new, that has to be maintained and kept up, right? So those are all questions you should ask about and see if you have planned to do that. If not, consider partnering with someone who can help you do that. And that's someone's day job, right? So you don't have to worry about it. You can do your day job, which is serving your customers better. That's of course questions about cloud versus on-prem, right? So you should sorry, to go back to the previous slide for a second. Yeah, cloud versus on-prem, right? And open source versus closed source, commercial data. These are all questions you need to ask, right? I think what you should think, like, your goal should be to create a flexible, customizable, extensible framework and platform for your users so that they can start building these things, building models very quickly and jump to the value instead of spending time on the technology part of it, So if you can, abstract away those problems. And then finally, making sure that data is available for everyone to use. This is an important part. Yeah, so you can go to the next slide. The fifth part of this is, of course, the trust in AI. Right? So this is critical because even when you do all of these things, often there might be other impediments to implementing AI, machine learning, and data science, and this is partly due to the lack of trust in how these things work. And that's an important problem, and even more so for companies which are under regulatory pressure or they need regulatory approvals for some of these models, right? So if you're a bank or an insurance company or a healthcare company, there are very strict regulations on what you can use for modeling and what techniques are allowed, what techniques are not, what data can be used, what cannot be. And more importantly, you need to be able to explain and document every single decision you make, every single prediction you make, and understand the impact of those decisions on real humans, right? So you need to, and we'll have a section on this down in the webinar later about responsible AI, but at a high level, think about these things as you start, and this is important on day one, right? So it's not something that you can say, I'm going to look at it later when we have some models, right? If you start thinking about this on day one, you will be able to make choices on the technology side as well, right? So this is something you might have to pick upfront, right? As you're picking a package or library or tool or platform, start thinking about, hey, which of these choices will let me build trust in my models and predictions and help me explain and document everything that we do in a way that will work well both for our internal stakeholders but also for external stakeholders like shareholders and regulators, right? So making those choices with this awareness is often critical. Go to the next slide, please. So let's take an example, right? So if you're just starting off, you're working on your first AI use case, right? So what does that mean, right? So you're either trying to find the low-hanging fruit that you can help solve a particular problem, helping shape the future of a company, driving change, or you're improving your customer experience, whatever it might be, right? So here's a workflow for what a first use case can look like, right? So if you go to the next cycle. So this is an engagement cycle like we do often with our customers who are just kind of very early in the AI maturity curve, right? But we kind of do an AI workshop to understand, hey, what are the different places you can help, but more importantly, start looking at the data. What data do you have today? And using that data to then come up with a whole bunch of use case workshop like ideas, and we can come in, there's others who can help you do that, but essentially finding your internal AI experts can often help as well. So using AI experts to help sort of crystallize some of these use cases and do this in a workshop format. And then once you have a set of use cases that you like and you identify, then going through an accelerated modeling effort, and you can speed this up by using tools like AutoML or automating or even using pre-built off-the-shelf tools to reduce the time to insights here instead of building it from scratch. Once you have these models, quickly deploying them, using frameworks to deploy them very quickly, and then start measuring the impact of the model, right? See if it actually helped achieve objectives. Did it align well to your overall objectives? Look at all the risks as well. Understand if there are things that you didn't think about, where they're like second-order unintended consequences, for example. Understand all those, and then sort of rinse and repeat, right? Try this again and retrain the model, rebuild, and if you do after a few iterations, you'll have a pretty good cycle, pretty good process, and then you can replicate this for other use cases too. Go to the next slide, please. And then, like I said, so we'll start off with current state assessment, right? So identify, looking at where you are currently. If you already have some models in place, or if you're starting off fresh, doesn't matter, right? So wherever you are on this journey, find where you are, identify the use cases or the business cases which are high value, high impact, but also the lowest effort then, right? So they might be high impact, but you may not have any data to solve that problem. So finding out places where you actually have data and you have the business buy-in to make a change, identify those use cases, look at the technologies, look at how all the people you need to bring together to solving this, and then actually going to setting in to solve this, and then start thinking about what are the risks of all this modeling efforts. How do you have a process in place, a workflow to monitor, evaluate, and approve models, sign off models, so that you don't expose yourself to any unnecessary risk due to AI, no ethical violation or any governance violations. And then finally, creating a strategic vision that allows this to permeate across the entire organization. So it's not just a one-off win, but you do this on a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis. Every day, people are able to come together and achieve this. That's your ultimate nirvana, if you will. Go to the next slide. And when this is done right, this can be truly transformational. And we speak from experience in the sense that we have seen customers going through this journey and coming over completely transformed, and when it gels really well, like a really good sports team, right? So everyone sort of clicking together and coming together to solve this, and your AI journey can be truly accelerated. So if you go to the next slide, we've seen customers, often starting off at the left with their standard digital transformation data management initiatives, and most companies have been doing something or the other over the last decade or so, right? This is the decade of big data, if you will, right? So people started thinking about it. So the data came together, started to look at data, trying to gain value from it, and often it takes time. Because the initial data prep work can be laborious and unproductive, or rather there is no immediate impact, but this was the hard work that needed to be done. But essentially, there is an inflection point where, if you think about the first yellow dot, is when, if you partner with or you use that opportunity to sort of expand, and this is where often we've stepped in with companies, right? We have worked as, so my job as head of customer success is to often work with our customers and partners and helping them at that stage, and then doing this AI workshops, guiding them to the use cases, getting those models to production, and getting them on this virtuous cycle where they can go up to the next level, where there is a rapid use case development phase, and then they are on an inflection point where this is almost a natural muscle for them, right? And this is the ideal journey. This is where we can help you get there, right? But on the flip side, if you there's customers I've seen who haven't done that, they've tried to do it on their own, and instead of taking the inflection point, they kind of flatline. Then that also brings in a lot of mistrust around AI and technologies, and they feel like, oh, people have sold us a lot of vaporware or things that were really not meant for us, right? So make sure that you identify where you are, and we can help you in that inflection point. Go to the next slide, please. So at this point, I want to hand it over to Raphael and to sort of talk through the journey for AI maturity, and he has some really good experiences over many years of working in this space. So over to you, Raphael.
Thanks, Vinod. And here at H2O.ai, we talk a lot about making your company into an AI company, right? And this doesn't happen overnight. There's a maturity that happens. This is a journey that your company, your technology partners are going to be all sort of working together, sort of to get to this sort of objective of making your company into an AI company. And various folks are in various stages, right? And so what I want to outline here is 4 major stages in this maturity, right? Initially, the potential and kind of getting started, and Vinod has shared some good best practices and kind of looking at that initial project, and kind of look at what an organizational structure looks like, and an initial phase and team development. So as we talked about technology, people, and process, kind of show a little bit what that's like. 2, sort of the operationalizing of it. So there's this starting to scale effort. 3 is kind of starting to really move from sort of an innovation or proof of concept or kind of a smaller area within an enterprise, and really starting to see that bigger transformation happen, right? Where you're starting to look at it from an overall enterprise transformation happening, right? And 4 is kind of building that infrastructure, that knowledge, and kind of really be at the state where you're really taking advantage and can get those objectives that sort of Vinod was talking to earlier about being data-driven, being proactive versus reactive. And when you're here at stage 4, it's really about figuring out how to keep maintaining it, right? So I've been in this big data AI space for the last 10 years, and it's very dynamic. So just because somehow you get to 4 doesn't mean you sort of rest on your laurels. It's this continuous improvement sort of situation that happens. So as we look at these various 4 stages, we'll look at some infrastructure that's needed, from a sort of platform infrastructure, DevOps perspective, the applications, right? So a lot of times people talk about AI as a waste of money until it's actually implemented and consumed, right? So if you built a model and it's not deployed, well, you're still not making any money. You deploy the model, but the application is not, there's no application that's actually consuming it. It's still a waste of money. It's not until that model is actually consumed by somebody, right, that you can start seeing some of the benefit of that, right? So what's the application developer sort of role in that? And clearly this is all about, this AI transformation is a transformation on decision making, right? So these decision makers, how is this data being fed back to them, and are they able to kind of make better and different decisions to kind of keep improving their business? So with that, we'll start at the first phase in this maturity on potential, right? And here really the focus is on your first application, right? What is this first application that you're going to try to showcase and validate, the use case and the value that you can potentially get in AI. And, I think Vinod shared some good tips around that. But, I just want to go back and sort of reemphasize, it's all about, what is your business challenge today? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? Asking those right questions, identify that from a business perspective, and then sort of focus on this. Okay, hey, look, at this is a use case that I kind of want to focus on. So what does that look like? So what that looks like is you're going to have some data scientist or who's going to explore that, understand what's necessary, right, and work with potentially a data engineer, maybe a data engineer, or maybe the data scientists themselves. Somehow you didn't get access to the data, right? And you'll be working together to kind of bring to fruition this particular use case, and go through one sort of life cycle. And sometimes the first time you do anything, it could take a little bit more time. There's a lot more learning. There's a lot more clarification, but there's a lot of growth that's happening sort of in this phase. And so next you're going to go to, okay, so you figured out your first project, and maybe you have, and I think, we're starting to see more and more people here where they have a project, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe they have 6 models in production, right? And really it's like, well, how do we start scaling this? And how do we start learning from the best practices and what's worked and what's not worked sort of in the past, right? And so as we kind of look at that, really here, your data scientist is still sort of key, right? You have a data engineer, and now you start really looking at the model ops area, right? So how are you deploying this model? How are you streamlining that model? How are you maintaining that model in production? Your application developers, how are they kind of sort of looking at continuing refactoring your applications? And lastly, that business decision maker, you need to keep feeding that person, the data, the applications, the dashboards, in order for them to kind of keep driving it from the business, right? And you're going to sort of like rinse and repeat to n number of projects, right? But at some point, you get to the point where, maybe you started this in a particular division or a department or innovation team. But at some point, this transformation starts taking a whole different phase in the journey, right? It's really kind of starting to look at that overall enterprise AI transformation, right? So it's not just in your sort of small group or innovation center. It's a kind of, really moving from that innovation team to an enterprise view, right? So clearly, as Vinod had mentioned, that executive leadership sponsorship is key. But as you take this step, now it's really going to start hitting much more sort of your senior leadership, right? And so you want to look at, deploying this, multi-tenant AI platforms that kind of scales with larger teams and have the collaboration and kind of potentially look at sort of a centralized AI sort of governance and security sort of infrastructure. So what does that look like from a go back to our operational perspective, right? So again, much more of the application development lead and your overall applications and how is AI going to be sort of impacted there. You might looking at things like the enterprise data science team. So maybe you have a small data science team. Now you can start maybe collecting a team where you can kind of share best practices and kind of look at more strategic enterprise sort of projects, right? And clearly you're going to keep working with those business analysts and potentially kind of looking at your overall analytics approach, right? Not just from a descriptive BI perspective, but how you can maybe start sort of blending the BI and the AI aspects together to feed all of that to be able to keep improving, making better decision making to those decision makers, right? Because that at the end, that's the key. So here, we want to share a couple of sort of journeys and from mature teams. So I'll let Vinod kind of talk to this a little bit. Vinod, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so this is a good example. So, when people think about mature AI companies, right, obviously, we have a lot of our customers who are on that stage, but really, you come about technology companies like Facebook and Uber, and people really talk about that. So, they built this entire platform internally. So, Facebook has a platform called FP Learner. They've written blogs about this. Similarly, Uber has a platform called Michelangelo. And really, there's a few sort of things that pop out, right? Essentially, what they have built is a managed platform. So, you want to abstract the DevOps away from the data scientist, which makes sense. You want the data scientists to focus on building the models, not worry about what resources they need to run on, what infrastructure they need to run on. You also want to offer self-service AI, have libraries, packages managed and pre-configured. Global data access with role-based access control, right? So people should automatically be able to see all the data that they have access to without having to request someone for the data. You go in and anything that's available for your persona or your group, it should be available automatically for you to start doing modeling. Then having a shared knowledge base of techniques, libraries, and features. This is important, right? So that's how you as an organization can build or work collaboratively and learn from each other. And to do this, you need to play a way for doing this in a safe fashion, right? So you don't want to obviously share any personalized PII information or PHI information, but still be able to share the knowledge, learnings, and features from one another across different groups. And then having a really clean pipeline, almost an automated workflow for training and deploying the models, right? This is important as when you get to like a cycle of really fast AI maturity, and you should be able to then build models very quickly, deploy them, and then have a feedback loop so that you can keep understanding the results and retraining the models. And doing this in a programmatic fashion becomes critical. And finally, being able to very easily A/B test models and evaluate the results that you can actually allow for a lot of different experimentations to happen, and then keep updating your models. Now, this is stuff that they built, right? But the good news is you don't have to do this, right? We have now been able to do this for customers who are not technology companies, right? So if we've done this for large banks, we've done this for large insurance companies, healthcare companies, and they can now compete at the same level or have the same level of velocity in their machine learning and AI workflows with the help of all the techniques and platforms that we are able to bring to the table. Back to you, Rafael.
Thanks, Vinod. And I think the other thing that's happening at this stage 3 is really taking a closer look around both risk and trust, right? And I like to talk about risk and trust as a two-sided coin, right? So sometimes as we kind of looking at deploying machine learning and AI and improving decision making, this is about using algorithms to find patterns, and then having these models that get produced help you sort of in your decision making. So what is it doing? How is it working, right? So can you trust this? Because if you can't establish that trust, then it's going to be hard to kind of really take this to that sort of enterprise level, right? And part of that sort of trust is you also kind of want to look at risk, right? And what risk are you exposing yourself to, right? And so as we look at AI and machine learning, H2O.ai has a strong sort of belief in sort of working with these sort of two main paradigms and developing tools and having them pre-built into what we're working to facilitate helping you understand, explain, interpret, build trust, and mitigate risk, right? So as we take sort of a closer look here, we're looking at the broader topic is really talking about responsible AI, and we've done some webinars on this, some blogging on this. There's even more coming, and within our sort of various tool suites, we'll be talking about things like explainable AI and being able to analyze existing machine learning models to try to understand what's sort of happening within them. Things like interpretable machine learning. So this is like maybe before you build models, looking at what are the algorithms, the feature engineering techniques that are more intuitive and easier to explain before you even look at building something and then reacting to what is actually happening, right? And clearly there's a whole aspect around ethical AI, right? So as you kind of taking this next step into the enterprise sort of view in your AI journey, is this fair? Is there bias? And evaluate what's happening in machine learning from your machine learning perspective, and establishing that from a sort of a corporate perspective. And lastly, you gotta make sure that it's secure, right? So part of that is being able to debug your models, looking at your deployment of the models, and making sure that it's secure and it's sort of up to date, and lastly, that human-centered ML, right? And make sure that the people can kind of consume this, and they're consuming the right thing, and they're understanding it, and being able to communicate that, right? And so we're looking at this as a bigger, broader topic around responsible AI. I would definitely stay tuned into future webinars we're doing. If you're at this stage and really this is starting to sort of hit as a sort of a challenge, we are happy to share some of our best practices and how our tool can help you in trying to establish a responsible AI across your enterprise, right? And clearly, we talked about that trust risk two-sided coin, and there's many risks that you see, and there's a whole bigger sort of risk that you don't see, right? So clearly there's a lack of expertise or sort of risk and regulations, but the risk around ethics and bias and having a sort of bad press around this, bad, reactions with your customers or delivering something, if you're not, looking not just at the tech, but, the impact of it in particular, because it does so much impact that decision making, right? And so if you don't take that hard look at the risk, it's going to be really difficult to build that trust, right? And as you look at that, you have to look at, where, for example, if you're looking at bias, where is it in the process that the bias comes into the system, right? Some of it, and machine learning is oftentimes looking at, building and finding patterns in data. So, it's not that the machine learning itself is biased, but it's that there's bias in the data, right? So you kind of start kind of looking at the data, and where the data is coming from, what data you're looking at and using for your models, going through the process of training and assessing that. There's another sort of a point where bias can kind of come into your system, right? And you really want to have this in a feedback loop, right, where you want to leverage best practices in the beginning to kind of like identify the right data sets, do some validation on the data, make sure that there's not sort of bias in, because we're thinking like, garbage in, garbage out. So if you bring bias, it's going to come out, right? And then kind of build models, but you want to have a review checkpoint, right? Be able to kind of, once it's sort of produced, hey, what's happening here? Is there any bias? Can we explain it? Is this fair, right? And kind of go through this iterative process until you kind of says, hey, this, validate these models and kind of take that into production. So if you're in this stage 3, thinking through this, we have a lot of best practices shared, kind of working with customers, and also tooling that can help sort of facilitate this. So lastly, we're going to look at this, stage 4, right? And in some ways, it's sort of like, achieving your goal, but at the same time, this is sort of a continuous improvement sort of situation where you got to the point where insights from data has become this competitive advantage, but AI, more than in probably any different technology area that I've been in the last 20 years of my career, it's very dynamic. Very dynamic. Our H2O.ai development team is very agile, but kind of with that development team and our capital grandmasters, they're always staying abreast of the latest innovations, and there's lots of them. And all these different innovations are driving different changes in what's happening in the products. So this is going to be very much a continuation and an improvement sort of phase, and kind of keep spreading the adoption and the consumption and the best practices, right? So clearly, as you move into this stage, now you're sort of very much in that enterprise view, kind of aligned with a sort of chief data officer. Maybe there's an overall sort of enterprise AI architect, right? And you sort of have alignment between the CDO, the CTO, the lines of business, and these teams that you've sort of developed, the data science teams, the data engineering teams, the application teams, sort of has this alignment, so you can keep working on optimizing and improving that. So, this is all a journey, right? Various folks are in various phases, and we have a lot of experience with working with customers at all 4 of these phases, right? And depending on where you are at your phase, we as a team and Vinod in particular and customer success has lots of experience in working with different customers in different phases, and how do we bring the right skill at the right time to help you accelerate you in the phase that you're at, and kind of help you move you accelerate your journey throughout this. But no, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to share at this point, or.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is our Sri likes to say it. I think it's already happening now, but we say that at some point of time in the near future, one of the big line items in every company's 10K or SEC filing is going to be, or annual reports or quarterly reports, is about how is the data assets doing, right? So if you think of the data as an organizational asset, then you start asking these questions and treating it almost like you do with your money, with your cash, or with your talent or resources, right? So as important as your finances are, you need to ensure your data is equally treated as important as well. And more importantly, you need to have ways to generate value out of it. Creating shareholder value out of your data will become a critical part. And that will be the big difference between companies who sort of take the next inflection point, who sort of widen the gap with their peers. And there's an old webinar we did in the past, and like a couple of presentations talk about companies where data is the most critical asset, right? So typically when we think of tech companies, technology companies being in that space where data is the primary asset. And as it turns out, they also end up selling maybe books or toys or pretty much everything if you're Amazon, right? So all these tech companies start off with data and use that to unlock different business lines or business opportunities. And the knowledge and the awareness they have about their customers' needs, their customers' likes and preferences, allows them to venture into new sort of business lines which they didn't have before. And that is a big competitive advantage they have over their existing peer groups, right? So I think every company can do that. And to be able to do that, you need to do this transformation, like Rafael pointed out, go through this 4 steps of transformation, and you get to this data-driven stage where essentially you start making the additions based on all the data you have, and you start optimizing for shareholder value at that point.
Thanks.
Last slide, maybe? Yes.
Yeah, so here's we're trying to help you sort of share some best practices and organize this journey for success, right? Because it's not it's not chaotic. We've worked with many customers. We've seen some of these patterns in the various folks in that journey, and at the end, again, you're trying to improve decision making, right? So you want to, as much as you can in that journey, trying to enable that self-service for the business, where it's the getting the team together. The analysts, the data scientists, and the developers kind of align with what the business needs, right? And make AI as consumable for the different use cases and workloads, independent of where you're at in your journey in the various phases, right? And as you kind of do that, keep kind of, as you grow in the scale, right, you're going to keep looking at the data from different perspectives, from different use cases, right? And as you do that, at some point in that journey, whether it's that, 2 or 3, you're going to start trying to centralize some of these operational constructs, right? Try to kind of, we want to better attract, retain, and develop the talent and skill that we develop along these different journeys. We want to kind of share some consistent sort of data science best practices. We want to kind of keep sort of optimizing our resource from the data science AI perspective, and as we scale, particularly into that 3 and 4 sort of phase in the maturity, right? Kind of make this more modular and consumable to kind of get to that stage 4 within the enterprise. So, Vinod, do you want to kind of close it up?
Yeah, thank you, Rafael. So yeah, I think as I said, you can look at all the ways to transform business, right? So learn how businesses are done. So we have a lot of expertise with customers, and we have published some of these case studies, use cases, look at the industry reports, see what other customers are doing, look at consulting reports like McKinsey and Deloitte have published some really good work, and then study all your partners and stakeholders, right? And then understand what they're doing and use that as a way to improve your workflow.
So, at this point, we've probably fed a lot of information to you. We would like to open it to questions. So Patrick?
Yes. Thank you, Raphael and Vinod. We do have some great questions here. Let's start with, do you have plans for low-code or no-code versions of your products?
Yeah, great question, right? So as I was talking about, we didn't talk about technology today, like I said, but H2O, at H2O, we've been in the mission of democratizing AI and machine learning. And towards that end, democratization means making it available to more and more broader set of audiences who may not have the technical know-how or skills to code, right? So we start off with Travelers AI, which is our flagship AutoML platform, and that is built for data scientists, but also for people who may not be familiar with coding, right? So it automates the entire workflow, gives a really nice GUI to be able to build complex, sophisticated models without writing a line of code. So that's definitely one thing to start off with. But then there's also a new sort of next generation platform called Q that we are working very rapidly right now and working with some of our early customers. That's built completely for analysts and users of like BI tools, for example, can pick it up. They can start doing augmented AI with that and start benefiting from verticals for focused apps that are the notion of AI apps, essentially, that these are targeted applications that can solve specific problems. So absolutely, that's the path we are on. Let us know, call us, talk to us, and we probably have something that we can help get you started quickly on.
Great. Next question. Do you think that AI has some impact on privacy? The segmentation doesn't give you less control of your choices. Since you can manipulate through segmented advertisements or use AI to offer different health plans depending on the medical history or race of people. So do these factors have an impact on privacy?
Yeah, great question, right? And I think Raphael covered a little bit of that in the responsible AI section. So part of why we, as a company, we believe that knowing and having awareness of AI ethics and responsible AI practices is super critical when you go through this journey, is because of this very specific reason, right? So there's a lot of legal challenges and also ethical challenges, right? So you don't want, for example, certain groups or certain segments of population being treated differently based on data, based on the biases that you might have introduced in your model, right? So when you're doing segmentation or any kind of modeling for that matter, if you're making decisions on lives of people, for example, like, this is especially true with healthcare and with financial services. If you're going to make a decision on giving someone a credit or a loan or deciding on a certain form of treatment, you need to be extremely careful. And a lot of the work we've done around responsible AI, especially with interpretable machine learning and explainable AI, is around understanding all those different concerns and giving you the full awareness and transparency as to what's going on in the model, right? And it's important to have a process to understand that before you actually start doing those decisions. Now, obviously, if you're doing things around retail, or if you're doing promotions, for example, or marketing campaigns, the risk is maybe not that high. But the moment, anytime you make decisions that can impact people's lives, you need to be aware of that. So these techniques are really important. I highly encourage you to read up and understand how to use those tools to help sort of de-risk your models.
Excellent. Next question. This is a bit of a scenario here. So a small company, less than 30 people, that builds industrial machinery. A few engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and computer engineers, so no data scientists. The machines are deployed around the world. The need is to gain insights from the machines where some perform better than others and why. Also, where the end user needs to be informed about upcoming preventative maintenance, etc. So suggestions on first steps without breaking the bank.
Yeah, great question. So this is kind of almost, if you think about the stage one of the journey that Raphael had pointed out earlier, right? So you have a data engineer, maybe some engineers, but no data scientists. Even then, I think there might be people who probably are aware of the data at least. So maybe people who are looking at the data on a regular basis, like the end user who's aware of what problems they need to look for, right? So what you could do is, obviously, I think we could, if you have no data science at all, you could partner with someone. You could maybe guide a consultant or even work with a company, like ours, to find out if we can help you jumpstart the journey. Well, most importantly, if the key is to see if you have data in a good place. If you have all the data being shipped into like a data lake or a warehouse, that's a good place to start from. So I'd say take like an AutoML platform like ours, like Driverless AI or H2 AutoML, and just throw the data into that. Frame the problem, like you said, you work with us to frame the problem, assess it, and then go through the journey of building a model very quickly. And the first step to that might be just giving a simple alert in the form of emails or just a prediction chart to the end user saying that, hey, these are the machines that we think are highly likely to fail or have an issue, and more importantly, give them the reasons. So we can also tell them not just why something is going to fail, but also why we think so. And then use that information from the end user to validate that the models are doing what they expected to, and then fix it, and then iterate quickly. So even, when we are a company which has very few resources, very little resources in terms of people, we can still help you get a quick win. You can do a pilot like this in a matter of in a month or month and a half. You have examples of customers who started off like very similar to you, with 2 or 3 people, 1 or 2 months, and were able to get a model in production. So yeah, definitely doable. Obviously, if you have the intent and the will, we can help you with that.
Great, thank you. The next 2 questions here are related. So what machine learning and AI technologies do you suggest for large financial trading, and how would H2O be useful to accelerate financial trading?
Yeah, so obviously financial trading is a very, very broad space. There is a lot of different things that go in, right? So obviously you have customers who have done forecasting of volumes. They've done some customers who have done pricing of bonds, for example. There's some customers who use the tools that we provide as an exploratory step to understand the underlying assets. And these are all things that are possible. You can with the help of AutoML, you can build these models very quickly. So we have so a lot of the financial trading techniques will require like time series analysis, and we have a whole bunch of time series modeling techniques built in the platform. They also will require often will require a lot of signal processing style capabilities, which are available in the form of recipes from Driverless AI. And then we have some custom applications that we have built for customers where we are using giving a tool for a financial analyst who's making trade decisions, for example. And then that happens by taking the predictions out of the models and popping it into a custom application, whether with Q or with their existing platforms. So definitely, and I think definitely a broader question, and we would be, if you guys are interested, reach out to us. Be happy to do a full presentation, showcase all the different things we've done for financial trading.
Great. So this one's a little long, and I'm hoping we can get through it here. Can you give us a tangible example of a case that went from the first step through getting the sort of benefits that AI promises, but from a business perspective rather than an AI provider's perspective? How did they identify the questions? How did they choose the tools? How were the models crafted, and how was the change management handled? And how do you come to that decision that AI is the approach needed to solve your problem?
Yeah, good question. Again, I think we have less than a minute, so I don't know how much we'll be able to talk, but the past webinars, or we have talked about some of our, and if you go to our website, look at our customer case studies, there's a whole bunch of examples pasted out there, but I'll point out one example of Capital One, which has been a long-running customer of ours for many years. And what we did with them initially, we started working with them also, I would say, about 4 to 5 years ago, literally, right? So we start off with a couple of use cases, very focused on certain industries, like certain domains around cybersecurity and other places. And over time, we built up a lot of expertise. We introduced our techniques, the wins from those models in different groups. And now we have an enterprise-wide set of initiatives going on there, right? Multiple groups working across different domains using machine learning models. And there is a entire set sort of business practice, like a data science practice, and AI as a critical mission across the entire company. And that's possible. And this is just one example. There's other customers of ours who have done that similarly. Again, probably time is not enough to walk through everyone, but I highly encourage you to go to our customers page that Rafael is showing on the screen right now and look at some of those use cases. We talk about the journey that some of these enterprises went through. These are all real use cases, real customers that have been working with us for many years now. And who all started off like similar to you. Like, at some point they were in stage 1, and they went through the journey to get to the stage 4 or somewhere earlier. But these are all real use cases, and I encourage them to read them up.
Great. So we do have one final question, which I think is super useful. How do you suggest someone who is not familiar with AI should start learning about our products?
Rafael, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So glad you asked. We talked about journey, right? So we have a journey for learning, right? So we have a whole set of tutorials and cloud environment. So there's this thing called the H2O test tribe that provides you a cloud environment for 2 hours to kind of try some different tutorials to kind of get deeper into the tech, right? So we have this first tutorial that kind of sets you up in the environment. And we have a course of tutorials to kind of learn the basics of automatic machine learning. And these tutorials each have a concept section. So maybe if you're really learning, we try to provide some intros. We provide pointers to YouTube videos to kind of like keep sort of learning a little bit more about the basics. And then we kind of go into some use cases around forecasting and time series data or sentiment analysis. We're using NLP. And then for sort of a more advanced data scientists, one of the things that's interesting about driverless AI is it's an open and extensible automatic machine learning platform. So you can actually customize it and bring your own feature engineering, your own algorithms, customize the scores, leverage data recipes. So these tutorials kind of like help, these expert data scientists, how they can kind of better sort of tweak it. And we also have some tutorials around H2O3, which is our open source. So these kind of probably you need to be more programmatic, so you need to have some Python skills to kind of work through them. So we also have a very prescriptive sort of learning path for that. And I highly encourage people to come back to this because we keep adding to it and updating it. So if you're sort of not a coder but you want to get going, driverless AI is a great thing. If you're a data scientist, and want to get learning with automatic machine learning, this is a great way to kind of start, kind of, and it has some value for whether it's a novice to an expert data scientist.
Thank you, Rafael. Really appreciate the quick wrap up there. I want to thank Vinod and Rafael for taking the time today and doing a great presentation. I'd like to thank everybody who joined us. The recording and slides will be made available on our Bright Talk channel after the presentation is over. We hope you have a great rest of your day.